Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Resistance Reads, and we have a new special furry guest today. Her name is Solana, and she's our second puppy mascot. I am
Yes.
surrounded by puppies.
Yes. You
Yes.
are
And Solana,
rich in puppies.
And Solana is my new little writing, reading, and running companion who is now trying to eat me. So, if she gets a little fussy, we apologize. If you want to see a cute lab Kelpie mix and you're listening to audio, you can always stop by our YouTube channel and check her out. And then also, we're recording immediately after this our second Patreon episode on Andor Season 2.
Yeah.
So if you are a subscriber to pay, or you want to become a subscriber to Patreon, that's the only way to access this. We will have previews of that episode available for free, so you can kind of see what you're getting to. And the first episode on Andor is already available on our Patreon page.
Absolutely.
So check that out. But today's book is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Is that how you pronounce that?
It is. I looked it up.
Nice.
It's Hermann Hesse. I thought it was Hermann Hesse, and I looked it up.
I've been saying it wrong for 30 years
my entire
now.
life. Yeah, I looked it up this week. It's like, is it Hesse? No, it's Hesse. And that's because he was German and Swiss, a German-Swiss poet and novelist. He won the 1946 Nobel Prize in Literature, so pretty notable author. He was born 1877, died in 1962. He has a huge interest in Eastern religions, which is very clear in this book.
Absolutely.
And Siddhartha is one of several very famous novels of his. I also recently had someone recommend the Glass Bead Game and said that was even better than Siddhartha.
Okay.
So that one is significantly longer. Siddhartha is like actually a pretty easy.
It's a novella.
Read. Yeah,
I read it in like a couple hours.
Yeah. I think it was like 3 hours for me or something like that. It's like a easy afternoon book.
Yeah.
But jam-packed full of all kinds of...
I was going to say maybe our shortest book we've ever done, but also potentially our densest book
super dense
we've ever read.
And when we do the summary here, the summary is like super quick, but it doesn't really do justice to all the kind of dialogue and conversations and inner reflections and everything else. So, and we'll talk about that, of course, in some of the analysis. And it was interesting for me in particular because I read this 15 years ago and I wasn't yet a Buddhist. And it was actually this book that kind of spawned my interest in Buddhism more seriously.
Okay.
And that is when I was like, I really want to understand what this Buddhism and Eastern philosophy stuff is, because I grew up Catholic and I had only really studied Western religions at that particular point. So reading this again after being a Buddhist for more than 10 years and having read many of the original texts and sutras, including like the Dhammapada, and then some more like the Jeweled Ornament of Liberation, which is like a Tibetan classic text and stuff. I have a little better idea of what what kind of the cultural influences of this book. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But Matt's going to do the summary for us.
Yeah, I also read this book in high school, and I remember really liking it a lot and kind of getting into Hess a little bit. I've got a couple other volumes. They're also kind of, I don't think he's a very like long-winded writer, because everything that I have of his is around like the 200, maybe topping out at like 300 pages. But I liked it a lot when I read it. I don't think I didn't respond to it the same way this time. And I think that's interesting. 25, 30 years makes a difference, in how you view things. So I'll just get into it. Okay. Siddhartha grows up the son of a Brahmin with a loyal friend named Govinda who may be in love with him. He leaves his house, taking Govinda with him, and they join an order of ascetics called Samanas. To leave the house, he kind of had to have a showdown with his father over like whether or not he was allowed to leave, and he was so stubborn in his desire to leave that he didn't move for hours at a time, and his father eventually like just kind of gives the point up and says like, say goodbye to your mother as you're leaving. But during this time, he and Govinda they lived lives of poverty and begging and self denial. Eventually, Siddhartha realizes that this self denial is serving the same function that drink serves an alcoholic. It's an external focus that is distracting him from reaching enlightenment. So Siddhartha and Govinda journey to meet Gautama, who has like had a moment of enlightenment and is regarded as like a Buddha, I guess a personification of the Buddha.
He is the historical Buddha.
He's
Siddhartha.
the historical
Siddhartha Gautaman. So Siddhartha is kind of an interesting choice for this book.
Okay.
So
okay.
he was a 5th century BCE, also Brahmin prince. He was a prince.
They're all princes.
They're all princes, and spent 6 years in deep contemplation, renunciating his like princehood and all this other stuff. It's a different journey than the Siddhartha of the book, because he had a wife and a kid and he leaves them behind, and leaves behind all the worldly pleasures and all this other stuff, and then becomes an ascetic just like the Siddhartha of this book. And then,
but Siddhartha like becomes an ascetic before he renounces his wife and child.
Right.
Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So they go to meet him, and Govinda is like won over immediately. Like he sees one, like speech that Gautama gives, and he's bought in, and he pledges his like fealty, I guess, whatever you want to call that. He pledges to be like an acolyte of the Buddha.
Takes vows, essentially.
Takes vows, yeah, before Siddhartha does. And then Siddhartha tells him that he's not going to stay. But he has a conversation with Gautama, and he's like, yo, man, I think that learning's whack. I think that knowledge is dumb. I don't think that teaching can get me to enlightenment. I don't understand how you could communicate the moment of your enlightenment to me through teachings. So I'm out.
Yeah, he challenges the historical Buddha and says, like, basically, there's nothing you could never possibly transmit that knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, yeah. Which is a pretty, I would say, arrogant and callous claim, but that's Siddhartha in a nutshell, as far as I'm concerned. So he makes his way to a nearby city and meets a beautiful and prestigious courtesan named Kamala. His good looks and self-confidence make a positive impression on her.
Well, first he does have what they call, like, in Zen Buddhism, a satori, so a moment of true awakening, but it's like a flash of reality.
Right, sorry, that's true.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And then he goes and get to the next stage.
Yeah. So the next day he meets her again after having shaved his beard and cut his hair, and Kamala tells him to get better clothes and make some money so they can date. Siddhartha tells her that after experiencing the deprivations of the samanas, like money and power should be no problem. He gets a job working with a merchant named Kamaswamy and succeeds at business, all the while thinking himself above the childlike people that he's interacting with in his merchant job. Over the course of about 20 years, Siddhartha becomes more enmeshed in the lustful day-to-day activities of a merchant, and becomes addicted to gambling. He has one last epic bone down with Kamala and then leaves the next day, leaving his debauched life behind. Then Siddhartha wanders in the woods for a while until he comes to a river. He's going to throw himself into it, but instead decides to go to sleep, listening to the peaceful sound that the river makes. When he awakes, he finds a monk sitting next to him. The monk is Govinda! Govinda doesn't initially recognize Siddhartha, but they have a nice chat and catch up, and, of course, he reveals his identity to his friend, because he's wearing, like, rich man's clothes and stuff like that. The last time Govinda saw him, he was wearing a loincloth. As Siddhartha makes his way down along the river, he meets the ferryman, Vasudeva, the best character in the book, that took him across the same river 20 years ago when he was, going to the city, and they become fast friends. Siddhartha asks him if he could apprentice the ferryman, and he says, yeah, absolutely, and you can live in my little hut, too. Vasudeva reveres the river, and Siddhartha is into that since he thinks words and ideas are lies and knowledge is for dum-dums. They get along so well that when Kamala, who in Siddhartha's absence actually birthed his child and raised him to teenagehood, she's on a pilgrimage and she gets bitten by a snake. She's going to go see the Buddha, actually. And she finds, she kind of like passes by, and after she's bitten by a snake, Vasudeva finds her and her son and brings them back to the hut. Kamala and Siddhartha bid each other fond farewell, and then she dies, leaving behind Siddhartha Jr., who sucks cocks and dicks. SJ, or Siddhartha Jr., quickly becomes the worth, hating his father for his piety, I guess, poverty. Steals his boat and all of his money that he's gotten for taking people across the river.
He grew up a rich kid.
Of course he did, just like Siddhartha did.
So he grew up a rich kid, right, but Siddhartha intentionally walked away from his wealth and his family, whereas, like, the kid's mom dies, he's 11 years old, and he went from living a rich life with servants and, like, being, like, basically a spoiled brat to suddenly, like, living with
Sucks cocks and dicks, like I said. Yeah.
Suddenly living with this ferryman.
Like, that would be a come down. Absolutely. So he runs away with all of his stuff. Siddhartha sets out to find him, but quickly learns that his son does not want to be found. He retrieves his boat, but the oar's broken and gone, or, there's no way for him to, like, get it back. But thankfully, Vasudeva has come along behind Siddhartha with an axe so that they can make another oar and go back home. Vasudeva eventually begins to die and or become a Buddha. I wasn't super clear on that. And Siddhartha unburdens his life story onto his friend, making this moment about him again, which is his want. Later, Govinda shows up because he heard about a wise old ferryman, and Siddhartha and Govinda discuss many theological concepts, and Govinda is becoming more and more confused. And then Siddhartha also becomes a Buddha. Maybe. The end. So that's my synopsis of Siddhartha.
So you didn't
a book
like
I liked
it
very much when I was a teenager and had a different response to as an adult.
I can tell with that summary. There's a lot of, like, very specific cultural differences, I think, here. And, like, I think like Siddhartha's biggest weakness is his arrogance to a degree. But, like, I also think he is kind of like the seeker who realizes that he is not the kind, eventually realizes he's not the kind of person who can, he's like, there's one point when, what the other ferryman's name, what's his name?
Vasudeva?
Vasudeva, yeah. Vasudeva is, like, talking to him, and he was like, he's, like, lecturing Siddhartha, and he's like, about his son, but he's really talking about Siddhartha. He's like, some people require a great deal of pain and suffering and misery to get the lesson, and no one can transmit that knowledge to him. And that was, like, Hermann Hesse's way of saying, like, this was Siddhartha. He couldn't, like, some people could learn from the Buddha, some people could get that enlightenment, but Siddhartha is too stubborn. He makes the entire, the search itself becomes the identity, and it's at the very end that's what actually makes, when he's actually giving Govinda the lecture at the end, the sutra, and it's based off a real sutra, which I'll talk about in a second, but he's actually giving him this sutra, and I think that's when he comes to his realization that, like, his whole identity had been the seeker. And because your whole identity is the seeker, you can never stop and actually find anything, because you constantly have to keep seeking, because that's your craving, right? So that's your attachment is to always being the seeker, so you can never sit still and, like, listen to the river.
That makes a lot of sense, and it also makes a lot of sense out of my responses, my separate responses to it. As a teenager, I think you're seeking identity. You're seeking so much about yourself and about your life when you're a teenager. And as you get older, you probably find a place to belong. You know yourself in a different way. And so I probably related a lot to Siddhartha as a 16-year-old.
Well,
and probably don't as much now.
Right. I do. And the reason I do is because I was, in a lot of ways, very much like Siddhartha.
Sure.
I had a lot of arrogance.
Yeah.
I was constantly seeking. I studied every religion I could get my hands on. I couldn't find anything. And I did finally kind of settle on Buddhism. But even that, like, isn't entirely satisfying to me. So I have kind of like, I have to kind of go my own way to some degree, even though I do believe there's a lot of power. And this is not just Buddhism. It's good to be a seeker. But this is like the entirety of the New Age community where they're just constant seekers and I'm the better seeker than you are the better seeker.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of like that mentality.
Yeah.
And I did have that in my early 20s very much.
Mhm.
Right? I got caught up in those kind of games of like who's the best seeker, who's the best,
Sure,
more knowledgeable
sure.
person.
Yeah. But have you heard of this obscure sect and their obscure writings?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That kind of thing, right? So, and then I was the person who read all like classical occult knowledge.
Sure.
I mean, to the point where I was reading like, 14th, 15th, 16th century texts and quoting them at people and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah,
God, I was probably such a little arrogant shithead.
Oh, absolutely. All teenage boys are.
Well, I was in my 20s.
All, you know what?
Early 20s.
I say
Still
teenage,
yeah.
but like I feel like that carries over till about 22 or 3, you know?
Yeah. And it was about 23, 24 when I like really started studying anthropology that I started to experience like, oh, maybe I was wrong about some of this stuff. And then I started seeing some really toxic patterns and like people charging insane amount of money to just like spend an hour with a quote unquote guru. And
Yep.
started seeing all the scams for what they were and the conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. And so that kind of changed me. But like, I don't know. I think so. There's this quote in the beginning that Siddhartha gives you, and I was like, man, that was me in my younger years. And it's like, holiness is an endless thirst. And it's like, he doesn't say that exact word, it was like a paraphrase of it. But then, like, wisdom needs constant attention, but does not necessarily bring peace. And that was like one of the things in the beginning I was thinking a lot about when I was reading this. I was like, at what point do you stop and listen? And which is why I was like, the next point I was going to make is that I think there's a stage where discipline is the key. You have to have some sort of foundational sort of discipline. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the spiritual realm. It could be as simple as reading a book a week. It could be writing every day. It could be reading poetry. It could be playing music every day. But like some sort of discipline to ground you in self-reflection. And there are a lot of spiritual practices that make that kind of a part of a communal thing, which is why they can be so useful and powerful. Which is why in Buddhism, one of the 3 refuges was the Buddha himself, and the Buddha is like the inner Buddha. It's not like worshiping a god.
Right.
Then there's the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and the teachings of Buddhism more generally. And then there's the Sangha, the community. And all 3 of those are places for you to put your discipline so that you can develop yourself, essentially.
Sure.
And so I think that's like that was the thing that really Buddhism taught me, is that sticking to one particular thing over a number of year period kind of gives you this foundation for developing self-knowledge.
Yeah.
And then once you have a great deal of understanding of yourself, then exploring it doesn't become like an endless quest. It becomes how does this feel to myself? How do I respond to this? How do I reflect to that? And that's really kind of the story of Siddhartha. He has to he's going to be an ascetic because the ascetics are where the real knowledge is, right?
Yeah.
He's going to starve himself half to death. And boy, as a person in my early 20s, I took a vow of silence for 5 days. I did a week-long fast. I did all of this stuff. And the things I really did learn were like lifelong lessons. But boy, are those hunger pains the second day of fasting one of the most awful things I've ever experienced.
That sounds right.
And I also didn't know that you're supposed to ease yourself back into food.
Oh.
And I got really violently
ill. I bet.
So throwing up. It was coming out of everything.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was like, oh, I'll just have some orange juice and then some soup, and then I'll eat some carbs, and then I'll go from there. But this was before you could really just Google anything.
Yeah.
So I was just experimenting. I read a book that someone did a fast, and it was the most clarifying thing ever. And it was your mind is so weirdly sharp and perceptive when your hunger pains reside, right? So I did a lot of that stuff, and I would like brag about doing that stuff, like I'm gonna go do this thing, and
Sure.
and
But do you even fast, bro?
yeah, do you even fast, bro?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was totally this, it was kind of like this masculine one-upmanship sort of approach, right? So like so he goes through that thing and then he realizes, well shit, this doesn't mean anything. Which is like the same experience that the Buddha had, except that the Buddha was like almost killed himself, but the historical Buddha. The historical Buddha becomes a wandering ascetic for 6 years and like
Well, that's how long Siddhartha's doing it too.
3. He does 3. I wrote it
Okay.
down because I was
Okay.
like, okay.
Okay.
So he does it half the time.
Interesting.
And then he realizes, so then Govinda meets the Buddha and he's like, oh, here's my discipline, right? And I think like Govinda, like I think maybe in love, but I don't think necessarily, I think it's more like brotherly love, like this is my best buddy and I just want to be with him and I don't know what to do with myself, so I'm going to go on this journey.
It felt pretty romantic to me, but like in a Achilles and Patroclus kind of.
You're like one of those gay men who's always like, everybody's
gay, Kimmy.
But like either way, like yeah, but the Iliad was definitely definitely gay thing,
Yeah.
right?
Super
but either
gay.
way, I think Govinda didn't have his own path, and so he's like, yeah, but like Siddhartha like really knows what he wants, so I'm gonna follow my friend into this dimension of like exploration of the self, and so Govinda just goes all in, and then when he meets the Buddha, he's like, this is the path for me. I don't need to explore anymore. Right. And Siddhartha, to his credit, says like, clearly you found what you wanted, Govinda. You should go get it. Like, because Govinda...
But he says it in the most arrogant, like, snide way possible.
He does.
Like, he does. Yeah, you've always been following me on my path. I was wondering if you were ever going to find your own path.
He does.
And you know.
And Govinda calls him out for that. He says like, why do you have to be so snarky about everything? And he's like, no, but don't mistake. I really am happy for you. Yeah. Like, yes, I'm being snarky, but I am happy for you. And I think the bitterness in Siddhartha at that point is just like, he's just like, I don't have what you have. He's almost jealous.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Which is why he then goes to the actual Buddha. Yeah. And it was like, your teachings, like, how could you possibly... And the Buddha is like, this is a man who's heard it all before. And he's like, look around. Like, you might not agree with it, but there's thousands of people who are, like, really interested in these teachings. And I can tell you just, like, they work. I don't know how many people can get to enlightenment. And I don't know if that... I do think maybe there is some truth in what Siddhartha says, and that, like, you can only go so far with kind of institutional practices.
I think that's probably right in a way, but to hear like a 22-year-old tell you that you have nothing to teach them,
yeah,
they already know everything.
Yeah,
that's just like one of the most relatable experiences anybody can have, where like a young person is like, yeah, I've read these 5 books, so I'm kind of like set. Yeah. You know? You must experience that a lot as a teacher.
Well, especially a college teacher. But also I was that way. There's no doubt. Yeah. Like, you know, I mean, I think because I became a parent at 22, I think that's really what humbled me. And to understand, like, I became a parent and my child was born 3 months early and almost died. And we were in the hospital for almost 9-10 weeks, where like he had 3 major surgeries that saved his life, and I think that is really what kind of pulled me back from a lot of that stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. That because it was humbling,
right? It was extremely humbling, and I still had arrogance. I mean, arrogance is ultimately about insecurity. Yeah, and I was bullied as a kid, and I was always a lot smarter and more well-read than most of my peers. And so, like, I often used my intelligence to kind of, like, make myself feel superior because I was so insecure.
I can't relate to that at all.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
But yeah, but I also think, like, man, I had so many thoughts just writing down, like, I mean, I had, like, 6 pages here.
Yep.
But in part because, like, I don't know. I wrote, this is one I really like. I think someone like the Buddha is a kind of genius. And perhaps like the historical Jesus was, if he's who people say he was also like one of these geniuses of compassion. And I sometimes wonder if you can kind of get to that like next level of wisdom if you're just not inherently a genius. But here's what I learned practicing Buddhism for 10 years. I suffer less than I used to.
Yeah.
And that alone is worth it. I don't worry. And there's lots of ways to get there. A lot of people, the key is just self-reflection. And like meditation is this forced practice of self-honesty. It is not, it is like, most people don't like meditation because they think, well, I can't stop my mind wandering. It's like, well, that's the point. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. Going on a meditation retreat and like the first couple of days on retreat are awful and uncomfortable and you feel like a shithead and you're just like, I am so fucked up. I am like the most fucked up person in the world. And then after like day 3 or 4 of saying mantras for many hours a day and like eating with your community and going on hikes and having nothing to do but work on yourself, it drops away. And you're like, oh, this is all just stories I tell myself. And I can tell you that stuff, but like, it's a completely different experience to just feel that firsthand. And then to do it repeatedly on multiple retreats and go deep like that is really a chance to like, it's like, I would say like a week-long retreat is like a year or 2 of really intense therapy. It's like self-actualized therapy in a lot of ways, right?
That makes sense.
And it's
because you can lie to your therapist, or you can omit things when you're talking to your therapist.
We all do it.
You can't do that with yourself, though.
No, you can't. Or you, I mean, you can. People.
You'll
do it
know
all the
you're a
time.
liar. You'll know that you are a liar.
But that's what the mass distraction is for. Like we have so many ways of distracting ourselves, and I also
on a retreat.
Yeah,
you're doing a retreat and you're meditating.
Yeah, there's no escape.
You can't
escape yourself.
Yeah,
because you've put yourself in, and that's why like people don't talk about this that much. Like you won't hear this, but like some of the Vipassana retreats, people go psychotic.
Ooh,
like people lose their fucking shit.
That.
Because if you have any mental health issues and you're suddenly at a retreat where you do nothing but meditate and focus on being and practicing self-honesty and many hours of silence, all of that stuff bubbles to the surface and you fucking lose your mind.
Yeah.
I haven't lost my mind, but like I have had like whole days on retreats where I like kind of self-isolate and cry my eyes out.
Sure.
So like meditation, this idea that it's relaxing and calming, it's only that when you've been doing it for years. It's not like it's like a lot of sense. Like when you understand the practice and you understand how your emotions work, because that's what you're doing.
Sure.
You're basically making friends with all of your emotions, all of them, and your trauma and everything.
It kind of reminds me of like going to the gym, where it's like, if you go to the gym like on a regular basis, like several times a week for 3 months, like every time you go to the gym, you feel great. But like those first 3 weeks or whatever, when you're like feeling it every time, and you're like, oh God.
Dude,
like,
running.
Running
is awful. Running's awful for like the first 2 months.
Yeah.
It is. Like every time like I stop running for a little while and I start back up, I forget how shitty the first like 2 months of running is.
It's easy to, and that's why I feel like it's easy to fall off of those habits if you have been doing them for like a medium amount of time. Because if you do them all the time for years, they just become a habit that you don't even think about. Right. And you're like, you feel weird if you don't do it.
Right.
But if you let it slide after like a couple months where you've like, it's far enough along that you've forgotten how brutal it is in the first, couple weeks, couple months, if you're doing marathon shit.
Right.
And then you like, oh man, I got to get back into it. You'll go back. You'll try to go as hard as you could before. And you're just like, the next day, you just feel so bad.
Well, honestly, so I'm doing a half marathon a week from today.
Mm-hmm.
And like honestly, like I'm in the taper down moment, so where you like lessen. But like I also, having a brand new puppy, I was like, I'm supposed to run like a 10K yesterday, and I was like, I don't have time. So what I'll do instead is I'll just run a 5 miles as fast as I can. And I get to mile 3 and my knees and hips just start screaming.
Sure.
And I'm just like, it's like I never run this fast.
You didn't pace yourself.
I didn't pace myself.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay. So then went back to my normal pace and then it was okay.
Yeah.
But it was and I'm slow. Like guys, like I run like an 11-minute mile. I'm not like, if I on a good day I run like a 10-minute mile.
Yeah.
But
we're old, you guys.
We're old. Yeah. I'm in my 40s, so that I'm not running fast. And I wasn't a runner. I was a cyclist forever. But yeah, I actually wrote that down. You can never escape yourself and all the cultural and individual baggage that comes with it.
Yeah.
Meditation taught me to be with myself, and sometimes that's horribly painful, not because any of us are inherently evil, but because we carry with us 1,000 wounds that have cut us and 1,000 wounds that we've inflicted on others.
Oh yeah, if you've lived to the point where you're like in your 20s and you're like taking up meditation, you've experienced so many shitty things at that point. So many things that have made you feel like a bad person, or like you don't care, or you've done something terrible or whatever. Like, and everybody does that.
Right.
But in weak moments, it's easy to feel like the center of the universe, which is, I guess, one of the things that was annoying me about Siddhartha. But maybe I should be a little like compassionate, because I don't feel like he was very compassionate in almost any situation. And I think that was the thing that was like troubling me, and maybe something I didn't pick up on when I was younger, but maybe that's the point of the book too. I'm just realizing
he learns the compassion with his son. His
That's
son
what
is
it
finally where it clicks that he cannot control his son who absolutely hates him. I mean, in fairness to Siddhartha, he didn't know that his lover Kamala was pregnant. She never told him until
they conceived the Siddhartha Jr. like
the last night
together,
right? And then
but he also did like spend 20 years with her and just dip out without saying a word.
Yeah.
So he has stuff to feel bad for, but you're right. Like, not knowing that his son is in existence is not his fault.
And then he really does try to do right. He loves his son and does try to do right by him, but he doesn't know how, because as Kamala says, you don't know how to love.
That's right.
Kamala actually says that to him. You don't know how to love. But then he's like, no, I'm going to love this child. And I think he's going to love the child, not just because he loves the child for it being his child, but also because he does actually love Kamala. He just got so buried in his vice and his gambling and his wealth and his arrogance.
Also is like his arrogance and his pursuit of, like, I don't know, self-perfection or self-gratification through, like, he's got this hang up where he needs to be the smartest and most spiritual person in a room.
It's like the seeker.
Okay, is that what that is? All right.
It's the endless. It's the seeker as identity, not the seeker as path.
Got it.
So he and like, I think this is like, and then when his son is basically like, fuck you, and his son literally breaks the oars so they can't follow
or even get the boat back
get the boat back, which is why God, I keep forgetting his name. Vesdeva, yeah. That's why Vesdeva is like, I brought an axe. And Vesdeva is the wisest of anyone in this book.
Yeah.
Hands down. And he's just like, and it's just such, I think this is what Hesse is really like showing us, is like all of the worldly things that Siddhartha had, born as a rich kid, then becomes a super rich merchant because he's also a very attractive person, which is why Kamala like put up with his shit.
Yeah.
And like he's like sexy boy, right? He's like a fuck boy, basically.
He's totally a fuck boy. You're right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So she like puts up with all that stuff because she's like super into him and stuff. And also probably he was like a very novel experience. Like, here's this ascetic who's trying to woo me. Like, that's a really, what is that all about kind of thing, right?
Because she's like, every time Brahmins show up here, they got this fancy clothes on, the best shoes, perfumed hair.
Right.
Like,
and he doesn't have any of that. He's in a loincloth.
Yeah. But he's like, hey, girl.
Yeah. He's trying to pull a Ryan Gosling on a loincloth, all covered in fucking dirt.
And it worked, apparently. All he had to do was like cut his beard off, cut his hair shorter. Like, you didn't even have to buy clothes,
Yeah. So, but yeah, so he finally, when his son is finally what opens his eyes. Like,
which is how it goes so often, isn't it? Like, you're not. You can't express empathy or even like understand it until you have like a similar experience.
Right.
It's like all those Republican like Congress people 15 years ago who are like, oh wait, maybe gay marriage is okay because it turns out my cousin's gay, my brother's gay, my kid's gay. Yeah.
So I think it's but yeah, so it's when he realizes that like his son did the exact same thing he did to his father. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, and then that's when he finally lets go, and then that's when he finally listens to the river and is like, oh shit, okay, and then that's when uh
When Vesidae is dying
he's dying and he goes
or
off and
ascending,
he well, so in the Hindu
because they
in the
describe the
Hindu
face
right.
looking the same as the Buddha's face, and then also as his face when he's talking to Govinda later.
Right. Well, and also like there's a tradition in Hinduism for like the upper caste for the Brahmins. The Brahmins are like the priestly, very wealthy people.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them are priestly, but like they're supposed to be priests. More like they're born into this caste of like sacred
That makes a
spiritualists
lot
kind
of
of
sense
stuff.
because they talked about him being a priest like occasionally, and I was like, was he?
Right.
When he was an ascetic, was he a priest? No, when he was a Brahmin, he was a priest. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Yeah. Well, he knew all the spells and all the right words to
Oh, that's right.
say
He
and all
does
that
a
stuff.
fucking spell on a guy at one point. I left that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was like it was
It was
super.
like the chief ascetic when they're like, "Hey, we're leaving," and he like freaks out and starts like you. He starts swearing a blue streak and like throwing shit around, and then like I don't. So I've been reading these books. It's like a lit RPG thing where like people can use their auras. They can like concentrate them and like make them a power, basically, like use them to do telekinesis and stuff like that. And I was like, motherfuckers using these aura powers on this priest over here.
Yeah.
That's great.
But yeah, so I mean, so you have to understand. So like, in Hinduism, they have the caste system, right? And each
Yeah.
caste is like what you're born into. So you're born into the Brahmins, which is the priest. Then you have the soldier caste. You have like the merchant slash artisan caste. Then you have like the servant caste, and then you have the untouchables, which are like basically the people who like clean latrines or like
Yeah.
they're not considered clean enough to even visit a Hindu temple. And it was Gandhi who actually broke that tradition.
Oh, good for him.
So so you had like these different castes they're born into. So he was born into wealth. He gets wealth pretty easy. He does the ascetic thing. He decides it's not for him. He visits the Buddha. He decides that's not for him. He's like, I don't know what to do. And then he does recognize that the ferryman has real wisdom, despite the fact he's uneducated. He's just a man who helps people get across the river, and also too the ferryman in Buddhism is a really important symbol.
I was wondering if that was the case because I know that the ferryman is kind of symbolic in a lot of different world cultures.
Yeah.
You know?
So at the very end of the book, you get this. He talks about the everything is a stone, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this little speech at the end he gives to Govinda. Everything is the stone, and it is actually pretty much the Heart Sutra. Hold on, I meant to pull up a copy of this. And so I'll read it. And it'll sound like if you read the end of Siddhartha, it'll sound very familiar. This is a Thich Nhat Hanh's translation, so it's a little different than like the traditional form is emptiness, emptiness is form. But I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh, if you don't know who he was a very famous Buddhist and activist in the Vietnam War, and he just loved and helped everybody. But so this is the Heart Sutra, and the final verse of the actual mantra of the Heart Sutra, which is Gate Gate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha, means gone, gone, altogether gone to the other shore beyond. What a great awakening. And the mentioning the other shore is the crossing of the river to enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the ferryman image. But here's the actual, it's a little bit long, but it's not terribly long. Avalokitesvara, while practicing deeply with the insight that brings us to the other shore, suddenly discovered that all five skandhas senses are equally empty, and with this realization he overcome ill-being. Listen, Sariputra. The body itself is emptiness, and emptiness itself is the body. This body is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than the body. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Sariputra. All phenomenon bear the mark of emptiness. Their true nature is no birth, no death, no being, no non-being, no defilement, no purity, no increasing, no decreasing. This is why emptiness, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness are not separate self-entities. The 18 realms of phenomena, which are 6 sense organs, the 6 sense objects, and 6 consciousness are also not separate self-entities. The 12 links of interdependent arising and their extinction are also not separate self-entities. Ill-being, the cause of ill-being, the end of ill-being, the path, insight, and attainment are also not separate self-entities. Whoever can see this no longer needs anything to attain. Bodhisattvas who practice the insight that brings us to the other shore see no more obstacles in their mind, and because there are no more obstacles in their mind, they can overcome all fear, destroy all wrong perceptions, and realize perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in past, present, and future, by practicing the insight that brings us to the other shore, are all capable of attaining authentic and perfect enlightenment. Therefore, Sariputra, it should be known that the insight that brings us to the other shore is a great mantra, the most illuminating mantra, the highest mantra, a mantra beyond compare, the true wisdom that has the power to put end to all kinds of suffering. Therefore, let us proclaim a mantra to praise the insight that brings us to the other shore. Gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. And so, and one of the most famous lectures that Thich Nhat Hanh gives is that everything is a cloud. Right? You are the cloud, in a piece of paper is a cloud. In a piece of paper is also the lumberjack who cut down the log. It is also the rain. It is also the other plants. It is also the fungi that grew up in interconnectedness. It is everything. And so you get this kind of speech at the end of Siddhartha, and he's very much quoting the Heart Sutra and all the kind of affiliated texts to kind of say there is nothing to obtain. Everything is already perfect. So all of this seeking, all of this searching, it is all just our arrogance kind of getting in the way. And the best thing to do is to just be. But of course, the reason you do meditation practice is so that you can just be. Because our mind is a bastard. The monkey mind.
Yes.
Right? And so it sometimes feels impossible to just relax. So that's kind of the point of meditation. It becomes relaxing once you have peeled away many layers. And honestly, meditation after 10 years is still not always relaxing. I still sit there and my mind does all kinds of crap when especially if I'm only doing it half the time. If I'm doing 50% of the time, because meditation is almost like a daily cleaning of the mind.
Sure.
So
yeah, you have built up gunk in there, you don't have to clean out that gunk.
Right. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I think this book is pretty short. I also took another picture of another quote apparently I wanted to share from the book itself. Not where is there it is.
The Glass Bead Game is the one that he won the...
That's the one he won?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had someone recently tell me the Glass Bead Game was his best book. Siddhartha tells Govinda, what is meditation? What is leaving one's body? What is fasting? What is holding one's breath? It is fleeing from the self. It is a short escape in the agony of being a self. It is a short numbing of the senses against the pain, the pointlessness of life. The same escape, the same short numbing is the driver of the ox cart finds in the inn, drinking a few bowls of rice wine and fermenting coconut milk. Then he won't feel himself anymore. He won't feel the pains of his life anymore. Then he finds the short numbing of the senses. When he falls asleep over his bowl of rice wine, he'll find the same of what Siddhartha and Govinda find when they escape their bodies through long exercise, staying in the non-self. This is how it is, O Govinda. And that was really... when he's quoting that's actually what the Buddha says that asceticism is. Asceticism is an escape, but it's a pious escape.
Yeah.
So rather than being a drunkard, you're torturing yourself with pain and all this stuff as a distraction from actually doing the work with your mind.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense that he would relate to that in that way, because apparently Hesse's family were like Lutheran pietists, which means that they were focused very intently on always demonstrating Christian piety.
Yeah.
Instead of like being pious themselves, it's all about seeming that way, you know.
Yeah, and this is like another thing I like wrote down is like I actually think that a lot of these people who become like terrible cult leaders or politicians who end up really corrupt, I think that they do have some kind of experience in their life. Maybe it's a mystical experience that makes them feel interconnected to everything. Maybe it's they see something terrible and they say, I need to change that. But then what ends up happening is that they embody this, I am the person to make this change.
Yeah.
And it becomes this arrogant thing, and they kind of fall in love with themselves and become more, they lean more narcissistic then. Even if they're not full-blown narcissists, they kind of fall in love with the legend of themselves and the legend of their story of how they became to be this person.
Absolutely. Like they might have rescued women and children from 50 different countries, Liam Neeson style. Just like the gubernatorial candidate we've got right now for the Republican Party.
And that guy. Yeah.
Dude claims he's like killed people on rescue missions. Like,
this,
bro, what are you talking about?
I think that guy is just straight up narcissist, psychotic.
Sounds
think,
like it. Yeah.
I think I think he's delusional. Like I don't obviously I can't diagnose him, but like I think he's just a very delusional person who thinks that I think he really believes all the shit he says.
Well, if you tell yourself a story enough times.
That's true. And we all do that.
Yeah.
We all do. That's what memory is, and that's why memory is so dangerous. It's so funny because the older you get, you talk to an old friend or you talk to your sibling and you're like, oh, you remember that time we went through this thing and like, that's not how it went. And you're like, what do you mean that's not how it went? And they tell you their version and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That's not it at all.
Yeah.
Like, my dad will tell stories about me trying to embarrass me, and I'm like, I don't remember that. Are you sure you have the right child? You have 4. Are you sure it wasn't another one and yet you're confused? Are you sure? Because my dad has 14 siblings. I was like, are you sure it wasn't one of your 14 siblings? Like, you're in your mid-60s now. Like, I'm in my 40s and I'm getting shit mixed up. By the time I'm getting my 60s, my head will be all kinds of I mean, we're just stories at the end of the day anyway.
Absolutely.
And the more you remember something.
Apparently scientists have, like, done mapping of memory exercises too, and apparently, like, the more you remember something, the more fragmented that memory becomes in your, like, hard drive or whatever, however you want to think about your brain.
Yeah, your memories that are less recalled are more accurate.
Yeah.
And it's also just really funny because, like, you know, you only really remember things that are emotionally significant. Right? This is why you don't remember, like, what you had for breakfast yesterday.
Yeah, I remember the first time I ever kissed my wife for, like, till the day I died.
Right. Because it was so emotionally significant and life-changing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I'll remember my first kiss, too, because it was like a nightmare moment where I kissed her and then her ex-boyfriend showed up 3 seconds later and tried to start a fight.
Of course. Of course, that's how it went for him.
At prom.
Mine was a great little romantic moment in her car at the mall, you know. And yours was,
Mine was
a violent and anxiety-producing time.
Yeah, that's like the story of most of my romantic life. So, my picker is broken, I guess. But except for her,
I think this is a good one.
This is a good one.
All right. Well, do we have any other thoughts about Siddhartha?
I think I articulated pretty much everything I wanted to kind of get across. I do think that, like, it probably serves you to have a basic background in Buddhist philosophy, even if it's just like Buddhism for dummies, or even if it's just like you watch a 20-minute YouTube video on the basics of Buddhism before you read this. Because I think some of your interpretation of what was going on is cultural.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Like, and I this is just a culture I've been fascinated with for like the past, like, more than a decade.
Yeah.
You know, so, and, you know, I've read, like, there's so many different versions of the story of the Buddha. Some are super mystical, where he was, like, born from the womb of an elephant and all kinds of.
I want to read that book.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually a really good manga on the Buddha, and it gets real mystical, and it's like they take great liberties, but it was like a 10-part manga series
All right.
that really kind of deeply embodies the principles of Buddhism. Like one of his teachers, his friends of Siddhartha, when he's just a kid, gets swallowed by a python, and Siddhartha makes the horrible mistake of killing the python to save his friend.
Oh no.
And he's like, his friend is pissed. He's like, because the python talks to them and is like, in order for you to proceed with your journey, you have to sacrifice one of yourselves.
Whoa.
Because if you're going, like, all great journeys require sacrifice.
Sure.
Right. So like that was the moment I remembered most. I think it was like in the second book. And his friend, who's like one of the coolest characters of the book, and is like teaching him all these things about wisdom, is like, no, like sometimes we just the snake is not, I am not more important than the snake. The snake has just as much of a right to life, right? And that's very much like, there's a lot of principles and stuff kind of going on with that sort of thing. So
I wouldn't be surprised if we did like a little primer in Buddhist, like, just like a class period or something like that in high school, because we read this in AP English, and I feel like Miss Starkey, I remember her name all these years later. I feel like she probably would have been like, this is the context you need to understand what they're talking about in this.
Right.
Which is why I probably had a more positive response to it.
Yeah.
Back then than I did now.
Right.
Also, I feel like I was probably more similar to Siddhartha, the character, than I am now.
And maybe that's why you didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
you recall the version of yourself that you were like, oh, I didn't like that version.
A know-it-all, arrogant asshole. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I definitely recommend this book. I think it is extremely dense, and I think you can read it in an afternoon, but I think it's definitely more meant to be read over time. So that's my kind of final thought on it.
Awesome.
Our next book is. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think I just shared them.
Okay, cool. Our next book is going to be Brave New World.
Yes.
Which is the kind of opposite of 1984, in that instead of mass surveillance, people are controlled with pleasure. So it's, I always tell people, like, we're a mix between, like, Fahrenheit 451, which is one we'll have to get to at some point. Especially, like, dude, did you see, this is a little bit of a tangent, did you see that ICE is buying robot dogs? Like, literally straight out of Fahrenheit 451.
Wow.
They're buying, like, the robot dogs.
Those don't even work good, though. I haven't seen a video of
the new ones are pretty cool. They're pretty chilling. They have, like, stun weapons and surveillance cameras, and they're super fast. Like, there's, like, these robots that can run, like, 30 miles per hour now.
Oh, that's terrifying.
So, I mean, we're like, I was like, so they're banning books, and they've got the robot dogs. I was like, we better start memorizing our books.
I guess so. Shit.
Before the firemen come.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be discussing Brave New World. Have you read Brave New World?
I haven't, no.
I did. That was another one, like 10-ish. I don't know.
Also haven't read I haven't read Fahrenheit 451 either. I'm a Bradbury fan, but I just like all of those high school lit, dystopian future books.
You skipped out?
Oh, no, they weren't assigned because I was in AP.
Oh, because you were in AP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I read Siddhartha and, like, everything that Salinger wrote, instead.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not a huge Salinger fan. Well, at least I wasn't. But I didn't read any of that in high school. I read Brave New World. I read Brave New World on my own, Fahrenheit 451 on my own, 1984 in high school. I did read that in high school. But I didn't read it for a class. I just read it on my own.
Sure.
So, because everyone was, like, talking about it for some reason. And
well, they probably had it assigned.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, those are, like, the classic, like, political thought dystopian novels that I think we kind of, like, set out to do in the beginning, and then we were like, we don't only want to do that on this show.
Yeah, we did one of them and then just went in a different direction.
We did two, because we did V for Vendetta.
Oh, too, God, of course. Yeah.
Right, and then, of course, we also did... Yeah, then we did Ministries for the Future, then we did Passing, Nella Larson, and then we did Grapes of Wrath, which is another one of those classic ones. Yeah. So time to get back to some classics.
Absolutely.
Next week, or next episode in 3 weeks, it'll be Brave New World, so join us.
Yes. Slash about, guys.
Have a good one.